Coming up on this week's episode of the Irreverent Nerds podcast, we talk to the one, the only, Guillermo Tomas Boyer, i.e. William Thomas Boyer, about his art career. Don't miss it. More coming right after this. I'm Richard.
And I'm Will.
And together we're
The Irreverent Nerds. Bum, bum, bum.
Nerds, I have some exciting news to share. We are now offering a monthly subscription service for our listeners. For the low price of $2.99 per month, subscribers will gain access to 2 bonus episodes and an invitation to a Zoom gathering. Additionally, subscribers who sign up for our email list are eligible to be entered into a monthly prize drawing. So what are you waiting for? Click on the link in the episode description today to get started. Nerds, nerdettes, and assorted nerd persons.
And nerd animals.
It's finally here, my friends. It is finally here. The day has come. We are interviewing the one, the only, the inimitable, ladies and gentlemen, intersex and assorted other humans. We have a nerdly man in the house. Artist in residence, William Thomas Boyer, or Guillermo Tomas Boyer, as he is sometimes known. How do you say your name in Japanese? Did you ever figure that out?
No, I have not figured that one out.
Oh, it probably isn't an equivalent. It's probably just a transliteration, right? So
probably.
It'd be like we because there's no L's in Japanese, right? Like so, or there's no L sound. So it'd be we are. They have a hard time. We're
him.
That would be. Wouldn't that be weird? Like, I'm like, you're trying to translate, you're trying to learn another language, and there's a sound that you never learned as a child because it's not in your language, and then you go to try to say a word in another language. I'm sure there's other languages that are different enough from English that we'd have the same problem in reverse. Like there's some African languages where they have like a clicking sound, like, you know, like I'm sure I'm not doing it justice. But yeah, obviously we don't have the direct equivalent in English. Oh, are you looking it up?
Yeah, I just looked it up. It's Wiramu, Wiriamu.
Wiramu. Ramu or Ramu?
Wiriamu.
Wiriamu.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
So we have Wiriamu in the... I'm butchering this. Are there dojos in Japan? Or
yes.
is that correct? Okay. So we have in the dojo. Wiriamu. So yeah, guys, our artist interview, our comic book theme episode for this month is featuring our very own Mr. Boyer. Will,
yes.
How you doing? What brought you here tonight?
Coffee and food poisoning. Yes.
Speaking of food no. We're trying something new. Tempura seaweed. It's actually quite good.
Yeah. I found Asian grocery store down the road.
Yeah, I still remember. So we had I think we've talked about this once or twice on the podcast. Our infamous infamous in our circle of like 4 or 5 people. Video Redneck versus Otaku.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
And at the end, we're eating, was it wasabi peas and squid jerky?
I think so.
And drinking Mountain Dew.
A yellow liquid of some kind.
Yeah.
In a Mountain Dew container.
Nameless yellow liquid. We used to drink a lot of Mountain Dew. I don't remember. I think the only time I ever drink it now is if I go to Taco Bell. I'll get a Diet Mountain Dew. Because Diet Mountain Dew, for whatever reason, goes well with Taco Bell food. It just does. Regular Mountain Dew, so-so. But for some reason, Diet Mountain Dew, at least for my palate, goes well.
I get Baja Blast Zero Sugar.
Oh, yeah?
For the longest time, it was the only place you could get Baja Blast.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They eventually, I don't know if they still do, but I know they eventually started selling it at stores and stuff.
Yeah. So I think this is actually my second interview on this podcast.
Is it?
I think you interviewed me on the very first time you had me on.
Well, I know you did a guest. I think your very first appearance was your guest review of the Batman movie. I want to say it's either that or the conversation we had about Batman on my deck. We were sitting on my deck, so it was like,
oh, you're right.
Introducing the Camel City Comic Geeks, I think is the title of the episode. I can't remember if your guest review of Batman came before or after that.
Probably afterward. You probably just were introducing me more so than an actual interview.
Yeah, well, I know we've talked about your comics, but we've never done like an entire episode dedicated to your art career and your interesting comics, your inspirations, and all that. So I was like, it's time. We've been talking about it for a while, and it's like, let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So, I guess we'll follow more or less a chronological order here. What, my friend, is your earliest memory of comics?
I would say the newspaper comic strips. I became a big fan of Garfield when I was a young child.
So Garfield was your favorite strip, and did you also watch the animated series Garfield and Friends?
I did. I assumed that it was the animated series Garfield and Friends that led me to read the comic strip itself.
Okay. I'm trying to remember which one I discovered first, but we're not here to talk about me, so it's irrelevant. So that was one of your earliest memories of comics. How about like an actual comic book issue? Like, do you have a memory of
I do.
What your first purchase or gift was?
Well, it was probably Sonic the Hedgehog issue 16 or 18. I forget which one. I mean, I think it was. I have an early memory of that. But I also have early memories of the real Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. I forget if that was Marvel or Now Comics. But
so, guys, you are going to hear some background noise because my youngest is here with us. She wants to interview Uncle Will as well. Or I should say, she wants to interview Uncle Will. He's not my uncle, but he is called Uncle by my children.
Do your kids call me Uncle, or do they just say, hey, who's that weird guy?
I don't know if they've, now that I think about it, I don't know that any of them actually used the descriptor Uncle yet, but they do know that you're Will, so they know your name.
Oh, okay.
Hold on just a second here. So, keep talking about your early years as I get situated here.
I also read some Ninja Turtles by Archie Comics. And so it's a toss-up of which one of those might have been my earliest comic. But I know that my first foray into superheroes was later when I got some really old some really old superhero comics, Superman and Batman from, I think, the 70s. So my first introduction to superheroes was a little bit later. And I got some classics.
So issues that were released in the 70s, or like at one point did you go like further back into like the golden age? I don't know what the golden ages in Batman comics would be considered, but I know it started in 1939, right?
Yeah, I think Batman was 1940, but Superman was 39, wasn't he?
I I'm pretty sure Batman was also 39. It was right
Okay.
around that same period. Different creators, obviously. So you had Bob Kane and Bill Finger involved in Batman, and then darn it, what's the names of the Superman creators? I cannot think of it right now.
Jerry and Joel or Joe Siegel Shyster. I can't remember.
I know they were Jewish. I know that much, like Jewish heritage. I remember that. Jerry's a pretty good guess. I think if you grew up in the Bronx and you had. But anyway, Jerry Siegel sounds very familiar. I think he might be on the nose with that. But anyway, so some of your earliest issues were Batman, like 70s, like some back issue Batman comics.
Some really old comics that my mom was an antique dealer, and she found these comics and gave them to me. Some of them might have had missing covers, but they were really old. They had these really trippy adventures in them with like red kryptonite, and there was this one story where
you gotta watch out for the red kryptonite.
Yeah, there was this one story where Batman and Superman were ghosts watching their future children, Batman and Superman Jr.
The ghost of superheroes future?
I don't know.
Sort of present future. Was Luther a Scrooge stand-in in this story?
No, Luther. I don't think Luther appeared.
Yeah, I think of that for some reason because I'm currently reading, like, comic book wise, which we haven't done this for a while. We used to do this a lot. Like, what are you reading?
Yeah.
I'm currently reading Hellboy in Hell, the graphic novel, and at one point, for reasons that I'm not entirely sure of, still, there's a brief, like, while he's in hell, for some reason, someone is doing a puppet show of A Christmas Carol, and it's the scene where Scrooge meets Jacob Marley. Like, okay, Mike Mignola, okay. Anyway.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'm going to have to read that someday.
Yeah. So props to our library system here in Forsyth County. In particular, the Central Library has an excellent selection of graphic novels, both adult and young adult. And I've rated that thing quite a few times.
Huh.
Try to keep them away from my kids because usually they're definitely not made for kids.
Yes.
Yeah. There
Probably
are graphic
not
novels out there.
Hellboy.
Yeah, no, Hellboy's not. That's true. Yeah.
So, and I was lately reading Sonic the Hedgehog by IDW, thanks to a shout out to Josh Ruggles, who gifted me the book.
Oh, yeah. So was that the most recent trade paperback for that?
Yeah, that was the most recent. It was a hardcover of it was the first hardcover collection from IDW that ends with Sonic in the game taking down Neo Metal Sonic. For those of you familiar with the stories, I have not been keeping up with IDW Sonic, so that was really enjoyable.
Nice. So at what point would you say you really started to love reading comics?
Well, it was definitely during the when I was reading Garfield in the newspaper. I would get the newspaper every day, and I was collecting them for a while there, cutting out Garfield strips and things. But I'd also read all the other comic strips in the paper.
Yeah, like Hagar and Zitz. Was Zitz out back then?
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, and then trying to think what else.
Maybe not when I was a kid, but it came later.
So Hagar the Horrible was probably in there, and like
it was, and I don't
Peanuts,
know.
obviously.
Hagar the Horrible disappeared from our paper at some point. I'm not sure why.
Okay. Yeah, I remember also like finding, like, back when we got I don't know if we constantly had newspaper subscriptions, but yeah, I remember the similar. I would go and look for the Garfield first, because I also liked Garfield, and then I would read the others that were of interest, including Doonesbury. Like Doonesbury, I kind of had that fascination you have with more adult things. You're like, what's
Doonesbury.
What's it like to be an adult? They like smoke cigarettes and stuff in the comic strip. I was like, It's like, what's this doing in here with the other stuff? Like, anyway. So that's when you first began to fall in love with reading
Oh
comics.
yeah.
Was it not long after, or like during this period when you also started? Well, let's rewind a bit. Like, before we talk about you drawing comics and experimenting with that, was there other forms of art that you dabbled in before you started drawing your own comics?
Yes. I used to draw stick figure adventures of my brother and I as illustrated children's books. So there'd be words on one page and then an image on the other page, and I would staple them together.
Nice.
Uh,
Would you read them to your brother?
yeah, it was all about our adventures and stuff, our fictional adventures.
Nice. Some real ones too, maybe, like the time you got chased by Dad's cow, or
Ha, probably. Did I tell you about that, or did you just assume that happened at some point?
I knew you guys had cows, so I just assumed at some point you got chased by a cow.
Yeah, I've been chased by cows.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I don't think we've ever talked about this. Like, your old homestead, you guys have kind of up on a hill a bit,
Yeah.
and you've, like, the house is up at the top of the hill, and then you go down the hill a bit. There's a pond kind of at the base of the hill, and then a fence all the way around the base of the hill, pretty much, and then some pasture land. And did you guys have a horse at one point? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. Excuse me. I've got phlegm in my throat tonight for some reason. Excuse me. So yes, our earliest horse was named Waco. We didn't actually keep him.
Waco.
Yeah, Waco.
Interesting. Okay.
We didn't actually keep him on our property. He was actually boarded elsewhere at a horse boarding farm where he got to run around with other horses and whatnot.
Did you have a second horse named David Suresh?
No.
What about Branch Davidian?
Yes, no
Yeah.
kidding.
Wake. Okay, yeah, interesting.
I get what you're saying now because I didn't know why you were laughing earlier.
Well, yeah, I don't think I've ever.
It's probably named after Waco, Texas.
Yeah, which is where all that went down.
Oh, right.
That's the only thing I know of Waco. Like, I probably never would have heard about Waco except for that. You know, the debacle that occurred at the Branch Davidian campus. But that's another topic for another time. Like, we could have a subscriber only episode about weird cults and ghost stories or something.
He could do all sorts of things.
Oh yeah. And I'm sure, like, obviously there's plenty of, like, sci-fi fantasy movies that have been made about them, comic books too, I'm sure. Like, so I'm sure we could find a way to lead into our content. But anyway, it's beside the point. Oh man, that made me think of the animal sacrifices that used to happen near where you lived.
Yeah, I told you about that.
I know this is completely irrelevant as far as your art career is concerned, unless you drew a story about it at one point. Did that ever appear in the adventures of
Milo?
No, you and your brother?
No, the animal sacrifices definitely didn't appear in the stick figure comics, the stick figure children's books.
Oh man, yeah, wasn't it? I never did hear it. Like, all the years I hung out at your house, I don't remember ever being there because it was like Halloween night, right?
Yeah, it would be sometimes late at night. I'd hear drums and chanting off into the woods by the farmland.
Woo. Yeah, no thanks.
My brother and two friends of ours actually went exploring in the woods and found the site of the animal sacrifices. Like dry blood on trees and a stump.
Ooh.
Cages.
Nice. It's a setting for a good X-Files episode. Which, by the way, guys, that is coming at some point. We are going to talk about X-Files, and my wife is planning to join us. That is coming. It's coming. Might be subscriber only. I don't know yet, but it is coming. Trust me.
The podcast is out there.
Yeah, I want to believe it will happen. Someday. So getting back to your story. So you did The Adventures of Robert and Will, or Willie and Robert, or Willie and Bobby. Was it Will and Bobby?
Billy and Bobby.
Billy Bobby.
No, I think it was just Will and Robert.
Will and Robert, yeah.
Or Will and Rob.
Will and Rob. So So you guys had ventures. So that was some of your earliest dabblings in art. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you did the things as a toddler, like finger painting and whatnot and that kind of stuff. I'm sure, right? Like, I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But
everybody
everybody does that.
Yeah, yeah. But when you started being more purposeful about it and started putting it in like story form and that's cool. So
Yeah.
so fast forwarding a little bit to your first forays into comics, like I think you've mentioned this before. Was it Joker here? I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about the Irreverent Nerds. They're sitting here in my hideout, all tied up. So they can't say this themselves, but they would like you to know that there are multiple options by which you can connect with them. Their Instagram handle is @irreverent_nerds. They're on Facebook and YouTube as simply the Irreverent Nerds. So pedantic. And of course, they are on your podcast app. If you listen on Spotify, scroll down and you will see a question. What did you think of this episode? They welcome your feedback, or so they told me. They also post episode-specific polls and questions from time to time, so please feel free to jump in and give them your 2 cents while they're still alive. All right, nerds, I've talked enough. Let's get back to this week's episode. It might be their last. Was it you basically drawing your own Garfield strips? Was that some of the first experiments?
Yeah. Well, we had an orange cat named Milo. I wanted to name it Garfield, but my brother named it Milo after the Milo and Otis movie.
Oh, yeah.
And which was good, because SuperMilo would not exist today if that had not have happened. And
yeah, and then it would have been copyright infringement if you did Super Garfield.
Obviously. So, Super Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Would have been a straight up parody.
As a first name, I can't think of any other fictional characters or real people who have the first name Garfield. I know we had a president, right? I think our president's last name was Garfield, Andrew Garfield. But that's all I can think of. Like literally only. Oh wait, no. Was it Andrew Garfield? I don't know if it's. I know there's an Andrew Garfield currently who's an actor, but I don't. Anyway, beside the point.
So, what are we talking about?
So your earliest forays into drawing comics,
Right.
So that was basically doing your own panels of Garfield.
I had I actually drew a comic, which I no longer possess technically, in which Garfield basically teaches Milo how to be a comic strip cat, a comedy cat, and basically shakes his hand and hands him over the keys to the kingdom or something, in so many words.
So he was the new normal.
The new normal.
Yeah, the new normal.
Oh, I heard you the first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Garfield was unnaturally nice in my comic. Anyway.
He can be nice occasionally.
Occasionally.
Yeah. In particular with like the Thanksgiving and Christmas specials from the 80s, which I'm assuming you've seen both of those.
I always loved the one where Garfield rescues Odie, or the one where Garfield goes home and meets his mom.
I don't think I've ever seen that one.
Oh, really?
No. That might be the one I haven't seen. I've seen the Halloween one. I've seen, where he goes to Hawaii, Garfield in Paradise, right?
Yeah.
And then, obviously Thanksgiving, Christmas special, and then Garfield's. I think one of my favorites was Garfield's Feline Fantasies, where it's like a series of vignettes as he and Odie imagine. Basically they're imagining themselves in different movies like Casablanca and stuff like that. That was I think I still have that on VHS somewhere, but
I've got it on DVD.
Nice. So anyway, so Garfield, so like let's get into the nuts and bolts a little bit here. Like, would these be 3-panel stories typically, or was it more like a Sunday panel with like, you know, I know Sunday panels can vary, you know, but it has usually what, at least 6 panels in a Sunday comic.
Well, actually, I started out drawing Milo comics that were just full-fledged comic books.
Okay. Okay.
They weren't strips. They weren't set up with a gag or a punchline. I know I just said earlier that I was doing comics where Garfield teaches Milo how to be a comic strip cat, but I guess that's technically misleading. Anyway,
So that was like maybe part of the origin story for Milo in a sense, maybe.
yeah,
Sort of.
absolutely scrapped from the official
Okay.
comics, but yeah,
So it's like
originally
rough drafts, concept art kind of stuff.
in my fan comics, yeah.
Okay.
So in my original Milo comics, which I started drawing in 1994, yeah, there were cameos by Bugs Bunny, Garfield, obviously. There was one where Milo goes to Jurassic Park, things like that.
Nice.
So eventually, in about 96, 97, 98, somewhere in that time frame, I forget. Definitely by 98, if not earlier, I started doing 3-panel comic strips with occasionally 6-panel comic strips, and that really taught me how to set up a gag, a 3-panel gag. And I think that's really when my comic creation really took off. And now, you know, I was only doing it for myself, my friends, and people at school, of course. But eventually, I did reboot SuperMilo in 2009 when I was in animation college. So I
Which
took all that with me, all that practice.
And I've got some of that art with me. The two. Have you published a third volume yet, or just the 2 volumes?
No, I have a 0, a number 1, a number 2, number 3, and a number 4.
Well, dang, I need to get the others.
Yeah,
I think I've only got 2 on hand, at least currently.
I recommend number 4. It's a really big issue, about 40 some pages.
Nice. Yeah, I need to get caught up. I know I've read some of it online because you have it at is it milocomic.com? Yes.
Yeah, milocomics.com. Thanks to Tom Gray.
Comics plural. Milo Comics.
Yeah.
Milo Comics.
Yeah, plural.
MiloComicsPlural.com. Guys, check it out. Nerds, go check it out.
Yeah, thanks to Tom Gray, who continues to pay for my domain hosting.
Oh, nice. Yeah, domain's not that bad. It's like, what, $20 a year, that kind of thing?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
I really need to start doing SuperMilo again. I miss it.
Yeah, I think that's like your sweet spot. Like your humor in there is really good, and like I think your panel arrangement I think has always been good. Like the physical gags and stuff that you come up with. Like, yeah, man. Like it's always seemed to me like with I know as humans, like we learn by observation. Like, so obviously you read a lot of comics, right, growing up, so that's where you got a lot of your inspiration. But then you got it and did it. Like me, I didn't read a ton of comics, but you know, like my comic book writing career or comic writing careers began and ended with a little bit of drawing my own Garfield 3-panel little skits of my own that I made up, basically, you know, and that's it. There's been nothing since then. But you carried it on, and you went further with it, and you know, I've even gone so far as to self-publish. So.
Yep. Yeah, I did. I did SuperMilo between 2009 and 2014. There were some breaks in that time period, but for the most part, I was working on it those years. It went on a hiatus in 2014 when I fell into depression and got busy doing hip hop with Dan Johnson. So that was my next comic book, and
which was about a rabbit, right?
Right.
Not about hip hop.
Right, a rabbit named Hip Hop trying to make it in Hollywood. And that bounced around different publishers until it finally landed. Currently, it's at Indelible,
Mm-hmm.
but Redline Comic Studios, which makes up Dan Johnson, myself, and Brian Wingrove, and a few other people, I think. I don't have a complete member list. Um, we're gonna release a standalone, self-publish it that way with hip hop eventually.
Okay. Okay. Now, how long has Redline? I know we're kind of jumping back and forth a little bit here, but
Yeah, we are.
How long has Redline been since like 2015 ish, or is that more recent?
It's more recent. Sometime in 2022, I joined Redline.
Okay, so very recent then. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Johnson asked me to color some comics in 2022. He might have formed it in 21. I'm not really sure.
And I think you've helped him with a few. Like you've been, I don't know what the right word is, contracted, recruited by various like comic book producers over the years to help with like lettering, right? And like, have you done some coloring as well over the years? What all has been your involvement? I know some like you've done straight up all of the art as well. Like someone wrote the story, and you've done like all the art for certain projects, right?
Right. I've done various. For Empire Comics Lab, I did lettering. For Indelible, I've done uh, character creation. You know, the character designs and whatnot. Penciling, inking. Um, that sort of thing.
And I have a memory of was it was it like a solicited fan contribution of a sort when you contributed to Super Fogies, or was it a straight up
Oh, right.
was it a straight up was it Fogelman? Is that the right? Am I getting the artist name correct?
No, Brock Heasley.
Brock Heasley. Oh, Fogelman. Is that one of the characters? Fogelman. For some reason, Fogelman is coming to my mind in connection to that. I don't know why.
I don't know. I think you're getting it from the title Fogies,
Probably.
but I'm not sure. But Mark Lapierre took over art duties for Brock eventually, so I just want to make mention of his name too. But yeah, I did a fan comic where SuperMilo meets the Space Pig.
That's right. That's right.
And that ran on Drunk Duck at the time, and I think the Third World Studios website later. That was just a fan comic filler when Brock went on a hiatus for a little bit. He asked people to send in their fan comics and whatnot.
Nice. Yeah, I remember you showing me that. I thought it was good.
Thank you.
Thought you did a good job with that. And like now you had another comic. Now you never got to the point of self-publishing with it, at least not yet. But I know you were researching and kind of dabbling for a while with a Samurai Milo
Yeah.
iteration, like kind of using the Milo moniker, but then obviously as a samurai, and this was what inspired by Stan Sakai's work, yes?
And Samurai Jack.
Samurai Jack.
Yeah.
Well. Okay.
Now I renamed that project to Bakaneko no Jetageki,
Ah, okay.
but which basically translates to shape-shifting cat historical drama, but something like that. I don't know Japanese. But yeah, I researched Japanese culture and the feudal period and whatnot for about 10 years until I decided one day that it was just too much for me to get it accurate to the time period. And someone told me one day after looking at my artwork, he said, "This is just looks like a Stan Sakai Usagi Yojimbo fan comic."
So like borrowing a little too closely, maybe.
Yeah, it was. Stan Sakai's art style definitely influenced my work on it. Of course, they said the same thing about Super Milo, or more correctly, Milo Comics. That was a different person said that. Not the same person, but I eventually jumped to Super Milo. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know why I've got this phlegm in my throat tonight, but yeah, after I received that criticism from someone about my samurai comics, that's when I finally jumped to back to Milo, and I'm glad I did. And because Milo was a little too close to Garfield, that's why I decided to do Super Milo instead.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it's still similar to Garfield, but he's got superpowers. I sent him on wacky adventures instead of keep him in the house all the time. So I was definitely trying to distance the character and the series from Garfield as much as I could, while still staying true to what Milo is.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like everything's inspired by something else. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there is like especially now. I mean, we've got thousands of years of recorded history, and like nothing is purely original. It's like we learn by observing and reading and enjoying the work of other artists, and in some cases very directly, like being mentored or taught by these artists. But like to me, like I mean, if you're a humble artist and you love the medium, like I feel like it would be flattering in a sense that someone was inspired by your work. Now, if they're trying to straight up plagiarize it, that's a whole
yeah.
other issue. But if it's more of like their art style was inspired by your own, and like to me, I would think that'd be pretty cool. I don't know how do you feel about that as an artist. Like, would that seem pretty awesome to
Oh,
you if someday you like inspired someone else to be like,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
like you said, as long as it's not straight up plagiarism.
right,
And just to give an example, Jeff Smith's Bone.
mm-hmm.
Jeff Smith. I feel like I stuttered or something earlier, but did not stuttered. But anyway, the Bone comic was actually originally inspired by DuckTales.
Oh, okay, interesting. I would
So
not have guessed that.
yeah, the three Bone cousins were based on Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Huh.
One of the Bone cousins is greedy and wants money all the time. Maybe inspired by Scrooge,
Hmm.
but the Jeff Smith originally did fan comics like I did in his youth,
Mm-hmm.
using the Bone characters he created after the DuckTale characters, and they would have adventures in Boneville instead of Duckburg.
Okay. Okay.
So he rebooted that as Bone, and
And decided to make him naked as well, right? Like no, it's like no bothering with clothes, right? I've only seen a little bit of it, but I don't remember him wearing anything.
yeah, Phone Bone doesn't have any clothes. Phony Bone has a black shirt with a star on it.
Oh, okay, never mind.
And then
The
shoot,
phony
what
bone.
was his name?
Phony bone.
Phony Bone, and I don't know. There was a third one that was tall and reminds me of Goofy, but oh man, I can't remember his name right now. Smiley Bone, that's it. So yeah, Smiley Bone is kind of like a hobo, like Goofy. He's got a hat and a vest on, whatnot. Smokes
So
a
maybe a little
cigar.
bit of Donald, Mickey, and Goofy influence. Maybe a little bit of Casper's Three Ghost Friends. A little bit.
Ha ha ha.
They have similar. You have one that's
Maybe
like
not all
short,
that.
short, one that's fat, and one that's tall and skinny.
I actually think that Jeff Smith created these Bone characters before the Casper live action movie came out.
Yeah, but those characters were around before the Casper live action.
Oh, they
movie.
were?
Yeah, there was
Okay.
animated shorts and stuff. Quite a ways back with Casper.
I didn't know if Fatso Stinch, what's his name?
I don't know if their names were the same,
Nancy.
but
I didn't know if they existed prior to the live action film. That's all.
I think so. I'm pretty sure that
Stretchy.
there were some
Stretch.
old like Casper animated. Because that's how it started. I think was some old. I don't know I don't know if it was Hanna Barbera that produced it or if it was Warner Brothers. Like I'm not sure on that. Like I have to go back.
It was the same studio or people that did Richie Rich.
Richie Rich. Huh. Trying to think who that was.
Yeah, it starts with an H, but it's not Hanna Barbera.
Yeah.
I can't remember right now.
Okay. Cool. So So getting back to your work. So over the years, obviously you've produced your own work, and you've also come out. Now this is more of you know, kind of in line with your faith as a Christian, like more in line with evangelism. You have a comic called Gospel Man. Yes.
Yes. I started. I originally created Gospel Man back in 2004 when we were at Bible college together.
Oh wow, it's been that long.
But I didn't actually start making Gospel Man comics until about 2010, and that got sidelined until 2017 when I started making it in full. I created the Patreon. People tell me they really like the comic. I'm not really sure it has much of a readership though. I struggle with that, but
Well, I know you've self-published a few,
yeah.
and given those out for free, like more or less, right? Like as a, or have you actually sold some of them too? Like, not there's
occasionally
nothing wrong with either approach. Like,
yeah, I give out a black and white version for free. Then there's a color version for sale. They occasionally. I run out of the free version constantly, but the
That's
color
cool.
version occasionally sells. I've also got a comic out called Benaiah, which I co-wrote with Brandon Wagner.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's
So that is,
brand new. That just came out a few months ago, I think.
yeah. I think you were showing that to me when you got your first copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also a religious comic.
And that one's like, is it sort of like happens in the world of the Bible with a biblical character, or is it more like a straight up representation of a story out of the Bible? A little bit of both.
Well, it's definitely based on Benaiah from Second Samuel
Mm-hmm.
and his mighty deeds. But it's somewhat fictionalized as well because, I'm taking what little bit we know about in the Bible and expanding upon it. Um, so it's got some action-packed battles. It's got some comedy, things like that. I've provided some additional information, which is extra biblical. It's not in the Bible, like why was Benaiah doing this?
Nerds, we would love to find out who is on the other side of the microphone. There are multiple options by which you can connect with us. Our Instagram handle is @irreverent_nerds. We are on Facebook and YouTube as simply The Irreverent Nerds. Makes sense, right? And of course, we are on your podcast app. If you listen on Spotify, scroll down through the episode description and you will see a question. What did you think of this episode? We welcome your feedback, including your constructive criticism. We also post episode-specific polls and questions from time to time on Spotify, so please feel free to jump in and give us your 2 cents. All right, nerds, I've talked enough. Let's get back to this week's episode.
Why was he there? Stuff like that. So definitely partially fictionalized. As far as Gospel Man goes, jumping back to that, it was my desire, yes, to evangelize because as a Christian, and you've been there, it's a loaded topic though, isn't it? So, I'll just be very brief. I have a belief in hell. I don't want people to go there. It's a terrible, terrible thing, a terrible belief, really. And
you'd rather see people go to heaven instead,
right.
like to spend eternity with God and free from pain and death and
right.
Yeah, which if you care about humans, I mean, why not, right? Of course.
Right.
Of course that would be the one you'd prefer, right? Of the two.
Definitely. I mean, anyone who believes this, and I definitely do, it there's just something wrong if it doesn't change your actions. Uh, but anyway, just change how you treat others, and if you believed for a fact that this was going to happen, the most loving thing you could do is try to steer people away from it. If you believe that.
Absolutely.
Um, so anyway, not only is it evangelistic, but I just wanted to. Uh, I used to teach children's church at the church that I used to be part of a long time ago when we were in Bible college together, and at that church there was this little boy who said to me that Spider-Man kills the bad guys, and um, children, they look up to superheroes, but I think sometimes they get the wrong impression that violence is the answer to solving problems.
Mm.
So with Gospel Man, I wanted to do several things, evangelism for the one thing, but it occurred to me that non-Christian people aren't going to read this. So I kind of switched gears to having a role model for children that didn't solve his problems through violence, that tried to encourage kids to believe that the most heroic thing they can do as a child in a Christian family, is to tell people about Jesus. I wanted them to see the gospel preacher as cool. Not that we should hero worship gospel preachers. No. As a matter of fact, I've had that concern. At least one person was concerned about that people would hero worship Gospel Man instead of Jesus. I actually printed that fan letter, if you can call it a fan letter, in the first issue of Gospel Man. So it's a very valid concern. I'm not certain that's happening, of course, but because I'm not certain how many people actually read the comic.
Do you have it online? There's a website for that as well.
Yeah. I always try to make sure Gospel Man is always free, because I definitely do want people to read it. You can buy the book, but you can just read it for free online. It's on comicfury.com if you search for Gospel Man. As a matter of fact, you can just Google it if you type in Gospel Man Comics or Gospel Man Adventures. It should pop up. I've got two different sites, one for the comic strip, and then one for the actual adventure comic. If you can call it an adventure comic, because there's way too much talking in it.
Like a Joss Whedon superhero film, right?
Well, Joss Whedon, didn't he do the first Avengers?
He did, and I liked that actually about it. But he definitely takes time for conversations.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that it's not like constant action all the time. It's
Yeah,
like,
me too.
But yeah, but sometimes the scenes go on quite long, and you're like, it's like, okay, Joss, okay, okay. But no, he eventually gets back to the action. I mean, he knows that's a big reason why people, they want characters that they care about, but then they want to see him in action too. So.
Yeah. Anyway, talking about Gospel Man, I know it has a higher purpose, but I actually think my better work is SuperMilo, and I kind of got sidetracked from that, and I was in the middle of coloring in 2014 the first trade paperback for SuperMilo. It was going to be an all-color issue, and most of those early SuperMilo comics were already in color, but I was coloring the new prologue, which you have a copy of. It's issue number 0, but it's in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear one day I'm going to put that out, but I don't know when. But yeah, I really miss doing SuperMilo. I feel like it was a superior work. It was entertaining. It was enjoyable. I need to get back to it eventually.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Life goals, right?
Yeah, life goals.
Yeah, like, that's kind of like me. Like, I mean, obviously, this podcast takes a couple hours out of our week, but it's as much about you and I just hanging out as anything else.
I enjoy
Um,
that.
yeah, it's one of the reasons we started it, or I should say, one of the reasons I started having you on was to reconnect, and I think that's been fun for the both of us. But yeah, I've got some other projects too that I like. Like I was dabbling a little bit the other day and doing some science fiction writing,
Oh, neat.
and I've done just a little bit. Like I know I did one short story that I recorded for the podcast in an earlier episode back when we were still doing the sci-fi focus and the Japan jaunt. Each week I had a short story that I wrote and then recorded with music and no sound effects, but some like atmospheric music and stuff. And but yeah, I love. I need to kind of push myself to put out some more of that. And doesn't necessarily have to be an audio format, although I do enjoy doing that. Um, but yeah, just the writing process. It's so hard to get into it. So speaking of creative work, so I wanted to ask you some about your process,
Yeah.
like from conception and then like how like your writing with like obviously you have the story structure, but then you have dialogue as well. Like, is it organic? Do you have outlines? You know, kind of what's your normal process with let's use SuperMilo as an example.
It's a little bit of both. With SuperMilo, if I'm understanding the word organic correctly, it was definitely organic. Uh, I did what I felt was funny, and I did what I felt the pacing should be. Um, the with Super Milo, I didn't so much write it. I mean, I gave myself an outline of where the story needs to go sometimes, but sometimes I really just let it go just where it naturally went. So even I didn't know what was going to happen, and it was a whole lot of fun doing it that way. Um,
Yeah, it's like you, in a sense, you surprise yourself
yeah,
a bit as opposed to like thinking through. Now, did you ever have situations where you're like, because I know for writers this happens sometimes where you'll come up with an idea for the ending of a story, and then you got to figure out how you're gonna get there. And then other times you might come up with the idea for the opening first, or like a central theme, or or maybe there's a villain, that you. I don't know if you have too many stories where you have like a. Do you have a recurring? I was trying to remember if you have a recurring villain character in the Super Milo.
not yet. I definitely have plans for recurring villains, but for the most part, it's real. Super Milo is really just about Super Milo as an anti-hero and what trouble he's causing everybody, and um, how he gets out of trouble.
Okay, yeah.
So it's more about the laughs than it is about. Um, it's not your normal superhero story.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be like uber dramatic or anything like that, but like yeah, I feel like you could still infuse it with humor even if you have some form of recurring villain because the recurring villain could also have certain humorous traits or ticks or things like that. Um, but like I know you've had a few times where he does like save the day, quote unquote, but with him being an anti-hero, it's never like pure altruism in that sense, right? Like at least not normally with Super Milo, like
Super Milo altruism. What are these words in this sentence?
would you say he's say more altruistic than say, and this is a very different comparison, but the only anti-hero that's coming to my mind off the top of my head is Riddick. So
Riddick.
Riddick is a very reluctant hero slash anti-hero.
Well, I'm not familiar with Riddick, so I can't speak to that, but I can speak to Deadpool.
So maybe a little bit more Deadpool and Hellboy kind of a feel. With, they both have a sense of humor, a little rough around the edges, but obviously this is more like G-rated, PG-rated.
Right. Maybe PG-13. I mean, in one of the comics that you don't have of mine, and I'm sorry I didn't know you didn't have it. I do a parody of Aliens with Sigourney Weaver.
Oh yeah, no, I think I have seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
So
he has like a chest burster scene and everything, right?
yeah, it bursts out of his belly button,
Yeah.
and he gets rid of it later in the story by eating parody Taco Bell and having diarrhea. So whatever that should be rated.
Taco Joe's or something.
Yeah, I think I called it Taco Gong.
Taco Gong.
Yeah,
Nice.
Gong.
I like that actually. That's good.
Burrito Gong. That's it. Burrito Gong.
Burrito Gong.
Yeah.
Instead of Taco Bell, it's Burrito Gong. I love that. That's somebody should start a restaurant. Hey, business people out there, you should start a restaurant called Burrito Gong, and see if Taco Bell sues you.
Probably.
It's like, but it doesn't have any of the same words in it. It's like, it's the spirit of it. Like,
The spirit.
but it's a parody restaurant. You come in and eat fake tacos. You know, I don't know why I'm sounding like Owen Wilson right now. Hey, wow. Sorry.
That's a good job.
Well, that's the one thing that's very easy to say, like, of his. You got to get his voice right. Yeah, which I love him in Loki.
Oh, me too.
Which he needs to have short gray hair all the time because the dude looks great with it. But then he was in this Jennifer Lopez movie. He goes back to his bushy blonde hair, and I'm like, dude, you're getting too old for that mullet, man. Like, do that close shaven gray look, man. It's much better. You hear me, Owen Wilson?
Good.
Yeah, I know he's friends with Zach Galifianakis, who lives well, not all the time, but he has a home just up the road, in Wilkesboro, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Zach.
Really?
Yeah. They've done a movie in North Carolina, maybe a couple movies in North Carolina, and I know they filmed a few scenes even right here in Winston.
Wow.
Actually, I think the First Street Mart makes an appearance at one point. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I remember hearing about it when they were in town. This is years and years ago, probably around the time we became friends, actually. It would have been like 2004, 2005. I got to look that up because that was before Galifianakis was even like famous. Like, so it's been a while. It's been a minute. Yeah, I think Owen Wilson was better known at that time, but I think he was friends already with Zach. It's like Zach was not as well known. Anyway, beside the point. So getting back to process, so it's a little more organic, kind of like you do your first panel, and then like do you ever arrange the panels for a page before you fill them in, or like do you have an idea of how the action is going to flow for a given page? Or
Yeah, I do.
So maybe page by page, a little more than panel by panel.
Yeah, well, for SuperMilo, this is how I do things. I just draw them in my sketchbook. That's the writing process. That's not how I do other comics normally. I actually write whole scripts, but for SuperMilo, I just draw it as I think of it.
So it's both visual and verbal right from this. Well, I don't know if verbal is the right word, but like visual and written right from the start, like both together. Yeah.
So I do what feels right, and then I draw the final version after I sketch it out in my sketchbook. There is a script for SuperMilo, but a lot of times I go back and I look at my sketchbook, and then I just type it in like that, so that the script doesn't actually come first, but the script helps me to. Some of the script might come first. I try to
like a
envision
backstory section or something, or like prologue, epilogue kind of stuff, right? Maybe. Or just the overall story, like the story idea, maybe.
Yeah.
Like Super Milo goes to Mars.
Could do that.
Makes friends, or something, whatever it might be.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the script doesn't always come first with SuperMilo. Sometimes the script is me retroactively uh, writing down what I've already drawn.
I like that though. I wonder how that compares to your average comic book writers. Do you have your Stan Sakai who does the whole thing? Like, I wonder what his process is like. Have you heard much over the years about how he does it? Because I know it's probably different when you have like a writer, then you have an artist who does the writer's kind of the writer's vision for the story. But I'm sure it's collaborative as well. Like once they get into the actual art and stuff, like I would imagine anyway.
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure. I've definitely seen some behind the scenes stuff printed in the trade paperbacks, but I can't say that I absolutely know Stan Sakai's workflow. Um, I know he does a lot of research, um, and that he writes out a script and he draws all the thumbnails. So his way of doing things might be more standard. I'm not sure.
So it would it be a form of like is that in a sense what you're doing? I guess it's like a comment. What you're doing with your sketches with Super Milo is like you're doing a combination of a rough draft of a script combined with storyboarding almost.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of like you're storyboarding it out, and then I imagine sometimes like when you get down to actually doing the final version, maybe some of the panel orientation or size might change a little bit, but like your basic ideas probably stay the same, right? Like,
I think so. Yeah, storyboarding is a really good way to put it. Sometimes we also call those thumbnails,
mm-hmm.
but yeah.
Sorry, only YouTube can use the term thumb. No, I'm just kidding.
Huh.
That has kind of become a YouTube thing, but no, um, but yeah, I know back in the day it didn't have anything to do with YouTube. I don't think
No.
like that term. It's kind of not been co-opted necessarily, but that's almost the only context I hear it in nowadays. It's like, but maybe some of that is because I've also been a YouTube creator of a sort, so that's probably why.
That's true.
I just notice it when you're doing it. You tend to notice it more, I guess.
Well, for comics, the thumbnail is just a small rough draft. We call it a thumbnail because it's almost as I can't imagine drawing the actual size of my thumbnail though, because that's too much detail in a tiny
You like
space.
a .5 micron pen or something, or point 0.25 micron
Yeah,
pen. I don't know if that even exists, but I know .5 does. I'm sure
it does.
maybe .4 millimeters.
But yeah, it's just a small little rough draft.
And then I know like on
laying out panels.
now with because I know you have a writer's table, you know, with the angled board and everything, and I've seen
Which I
like you
don't
have the
use.
actual like comic book panel pages where it's got it, you know, it's in large format, and then you draw it in, you do the inking, right, and then later the coloring. Like now, a lot of your coloring, you do. I don't know what the right word would be, but post production in a sense. Like once you've digitized the ink drawing, is that the stage at which you typically do your coloring?
Yes, I do all my coloring digitally. Uh, I traditionally pencil and ink, then I scan in and color. I used to color in Photoshop. Now I color in Clip Studio Paint
Okay.
because it's cheaper. It's a cheaper program.
Yeah, I would imagine the other is still quite expensive. Well, I've heard they have a subscription service now.
Yes, and
Still not
I'm
cheap, though, I
allergic to
imagine.
subscription services.
Yeah, because if you forget you have it, then you just keep getting charged for it, and you're like, ah.
Yeah,
And like 10 years later, you're like, I spent $400 on that.
it's like $20 a month or something, and uh, I might not even get to my computer for that month. You know?
Yeah, I guess if you're a professional, like doing it all the time, it may absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, I pay $10 a month for Microsoft 365, so you know it's like, and I don't always use that every month necessarily, But it's the Microsoft Office, so you kind of have to, more or less, you kind of have to have it.
Right, but you
Um,
just paid a one-time thing for it. You're not paying monthly, right?
I pay monthly right now, but yeah,
Really?
you can pay annually because it is straight up. It's like it's all online now.
Microsoft Office?
Yeah, like you can download it on your computer, but I think they've gone. I don't think they even sell it as a suite anymore. I think it's straight up subscription
I just hate
only
that
now.
though. I do.
Like you can pay annual, like you save money if you pay it all at once annually, kind of like with Amazon Prime, that kind of thing, or most subscription services.
I just I just find that terrible. Um, I use Libre or something like that as my word processor. I don't even use the Microsoft Word anymore. Uh,
Well, you also have a really old computer, right? So,
well, 2016, 2017,
oh,
something like that.
well, as old as I thought then.
2016, I think. It's time I got a new computer, I think though, but it meets my art needs.
Will
It
you
just
will
doesn't
you
like our podcast.
will you finally go iMac?
No.
No. Yeah, you can get a decent one now, like the desktop for like at least the computer unit. I mean, you do still have to buy like keyboards and stuff, but the unit itself you can get for about $500. Like
Really?
yeah, 500-600. It's not too bad actually. Now you don't have to use the Apple monitor necessarily. Obviously, their monitors are gorgeous. Like
Yeah, they
the
are.
resolution is really nice. But yeah, the monitor costs more than the computer. I think.
I just I just know that they cost more and aren't necessary. I don't know if they're I'd have to get all new software and everything. I
Uh,
think.
possibly. It depends. I know you can run some software on the Mac that's made for PC, like it with like a, I don't know if emulator is the right word necessarily, but like you can have a Microsoft desktop on your Apple. Um, but hey, maybe you could maybe get your refurbished one or something.
True, true.
That does seem to be the choice for artists for whatever reason. Like MacBooks and iMacs seem to be more popular amongst artists.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know the reasons for that. I don't know if that's just a culture thing, or if it's like legit, like just better. Obviously, the resolution on their monitors has long been better, with the exception of like just recently, like PCs, like laptops are starting to catch up and have like 4K monitors and such, higher resolution. Yeah, but for the longest time, like Apple was ahead of the game on that side. Anyway, we're coming up. Well, we just passed an hour here, so we're about ready to finish up. So, do you have any final thoughts, like say for your fellow artists out there? Any words of inspiration um or cheers or like, hey, hire me. I'm up for whatever you want to plug. You can plug in there in our final few minutes here. This
Buy my
podcast,
stuff.
this episode's all about you, man.
Buy my stuff. I pour.
So can they buy the comics on SuperMiloComic.com? Like, is there a shop, or where can they get these?
If you go to indieplanet.com, search for SuperMilo or Gospel Man and or my Benaiah book, my and Brandon Wagner's Benaiah book, and you should be able to find them fairly easy.
Is this a digital version, or can they order a physical and then you have to ship it to them?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Or if you want a signed copy, you can hit me up directly and I can mail you a signed copy. But generally speaking, the indieplanet.com store is how I normally sell the books. So, but final words, I would say, I'm currently on sabbatical. I'm taking a break. My fellow creators, keep if it's in you. If you are a comic artist, if you are a cartoonist, if you are an artist in general, you don't have. You can't help but create. That's in some ways it's who you are. I mean, we're more than that. If we lose our ability to create, I want you to know that you're more than that. But don't give up. If you can still create, and that's a passion of yours, don't give up. Take breaks, rest, and just know that if you have to take a break or rest, it's not forever. It's just temporary. You heal up, and just know that when you are in the creative mood again, it will hit you. You're not washed up. I feel like some of my fellow artists need to hear this. I go through this every now and then, where I just needed to just sit back and just take a break from all the creating. But it's in me. It's a part of who I am, and I don't see. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I believe it's so ingrained in me, in who I am, that in one way or another I am going to create. Maybe it's comics for other people to read, or maybe it's just something for myself. But us creative types, that's what we do. We create.
Good words, my friend. Well, hey, nerds, thanks for joining us this week. Come back next week. We will have an anime-themed episode. We haven't nailed down a topic yet, but we got some ideas. We're kind of batting around, but it will be about anime. Which, by the way, to date, our most popular episode of all time, which we probably need to revisit this at some point, but our most popular episode of all time is our discussion of My Hero Academia, with you and then Mr. Dan Johnson as our guest. And to date, that one's still getting listens. Like even now, like people still checking it out. And you guys definitely spoken on that one. That has been second. Obviously, would be Dragon Ball Z. Our very first discussion that we had with Zach about Dragon Ball Z. Those are our top two. So like, animes, good animes, obviously. We got some ideas, and we're gonna toss around, and we'll have that for you guys next Wednesday, and then of course we will end the month with a movie of the month, which, surprise, surprise, will not be Guardians of the Galaxy this month because we are offering that to subscribers only. In fact, we completed our review of that actually this past Saturday, and it's going to be dropping here soon for subscribers only. And we went to see that opening weekend because we like to do that. Like I prefer to, if I can help it, I like to go see opening weekend as much as possible. So we went ahead and recorded that episode. But as I said, that will be subscribers only, so there'll be something else that we'll be talking about coming into the month. Anyway, nerds, thanks for joining us. Until next time, live long and prosper.
Sayonara.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Irreverent Nerds podcast. If you would, consider following us on Instagram. We are there at irreverent_nerds. You can also hit us up on Facebook. Just look us up there at the Irreverent Nerds. That's our fan page. We have a YouTube channel as well. Once again, the Irreverent Nerds. Nice and simple, right? And if you go to www.irreverentnerds.com, that will send you to our Podcasters for Spotify, formerly Anchor.fm profile, where you can send us a voice message if you want to, support us financially, or listen to the podcast. It will also direct you to other places you can listen, like Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, you name it. So, like, comment, subscribe, follow, all those good things, wherever you find us, wherever you listen to us, we would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, nerds, live long and prosper. Avengers assemble! I'm Batman.